The Russia-Ukraine war has reshaped global geopolitics, fractured international relations, and left a lasting impact on both nations. What began as a regional conflict in 2014 escalated into a full-scale war in 2022, with devastating consequences. Now, as the Trump administration seeks to broker a peace agreement, the world watches closely. However, recent tensions between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, coupled with the US shifting its stance toward Russia, have deepened geopolitical uncertainties. Could this signal a new world order, where traditional alliances crumble in favor of emerging power blocs? The roots of the war trace back to 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea following Ukraine's Euromaidan protests, which led to the ousting of pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych. Moscow cited the protection of Russian-speaking populations and strategic interests as justification. This move was met with international condemnation, economic sanctions, and the rise of separatist movements in Donetsk and Luhansk, backed by Russia. Tensions exploded in February 2022, when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin framed its actions as a special military operation aimed at denazifying Ukraine and preventing NATO expansion. Ukraine, backed by Western allies, fiercely resisted, leading to an ongoing and brutal conflict. As of today, the war remains a grinding battle of attrition. Russia holds significant portions of Ukrainian territory but faces heavy military losses, economic sanctions, and international isolation. Ukraine, supported by the US and NATO allies, has mounted strong counter-offensives but struggles with depleting resources and the human toll of the conflict. The situation remains volatile, with no clear military victor in sight. However, the geopolitical situation has taken an even more complex turn, with Trump's administration suspending US military aid to Ukraine, urging negotiations instead. This has sparked concerns that Washington is abandoning its European partners and NATO, potentially empowering Russia. With the return of Donald Trump to the White House, a shift in US foreign policy is evident. The administration is actively seeking a peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine, advocating for negotiations rather than continued military support. Trump's proposed deal includes: the US would not offer security guarantees, instead advocating for a demilitarized buffer zone or neutrality agreement to prevent Ukraine from immediate NATO accession, a demilitarized buffer zone or neutrality agreement to prevent Ukraine from immediate NATO accession, territorial concessions. Speculation exists that Russia may demand permanent control over Crimea and parts of Donetsk and Luhansk in exchange for peace, economic sanctions relief. A potential rollback of certain sanctions on Russia to incentivize withdrawal from parts of Ukraine. A recent Oval Office meeting between Trump and Zelensky escalated into a heated exchange, with Trump accusing Zelensky of gambling with World War III. The meeting ended without agreements, and shortly after, Trump suspended $1.61 billion in military aid to Ukraine, increasing fears that the US is coercing Kyiv into a deal on Russia's terms. This decision has been widely criticized as benefiting Russian President Vladimir Putin at the expense of Ukraine's sovereignty. Additionally, Trump's recent comments about NATO, suggesting that the US might not defend member states who fail to meet military spending targets, have sent shockwaves across Europe. Many NATO members now question America's commitment, which could destabilize the alliance and encourage Russian expansionism. While the idea of peace is welcomed globally, significant roadblocks remain: Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Zelensky has repeatedly vowed not to surrender any land. Would Ukraine accept a deal that leaves parts of its territory under Russian control? Russia's demands and trust issues. Moscow has shown little indication of backing down. Can Russia be trusted to uphold any negotiated agreement, given its past actions, Western allies and NATO's stance? Many European nations, particularly Poland and the Baltic states, fear appeasing Russia could embolden further aggression. Would NATO accept a compromise? Domestic political pressures. Both in Ukraine and the US, there are factions strongly opposed to negotiations. arguing that any concessions would reward Russia's aggression. The war is complex, with narratives shaped by political leanings and historical perspectives. Ukraine is largely seen as the victim, defending its sovereignty against an aggressive invader. Russia portrays itself as countering Western expansion and protecting Russian-speaking populations. The West, US and NATO, supports Ukraine, but has been accused of escalating tensions by expanding military aid. The reality is that war is rarely black and white. Both sides have suffered immense losses, civilians have paid the highest price, and propaganda fuels the divide. The world yearns for an end to the bloodshed. A realistic peace deal would require mutual compromise. Russia and Ukraine would need to make painful concessions, international mediation. Countries like Turkey, China, or even the US could serve as brokers. Economic reconstruction plans. A post-war Ukraine would need significant rebuilding, requiring international support. However, with the US appearing to shift away from its traditional alliances and Trump's alignment with far-right ideals in Europe, a broader geopolitical shift is underway. A potential US withdrawal from NATO, coupled with increasing European distrust in Washington, could reshape global power dynamics in unprecedented ways. The road to peace in the Russia-Ukraine war is fraught with obstacles. As Trump's administration pushes for negotiations while seemingly tilting toward Russia, the outcome remains uncertain. Can diplomacy succeed where war has failed, or is another phase of conflict inevitable? More broadly, is the world witnessing the unraveling of the Western-led global order with new power blocs emerging? The coming months will reveal whether a lasting resolution is within reach, or if war continues to define the fate of both nations and the future of global geopolitics.